Before we get started, what is wrong with rugby fantasy?
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tucci-Zala, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Hello and welcome back everyone to the On the Line Rugby Podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Nagaishi, and welcome back. You know, it's a weird world for fantasy sports. You know, we got football coming back up. You got basketball starting to draft for the fall this year. And obviously the World Cup's in full spring. But what is going on with all of the lackluster options for fantasy rugby? Now, you may or may not, compete in Super Brew, maybe some ESPN Six Nations, Fox for all you Australians. I myself used to compete in that, loved it a lot, moved over to Super Brew, but with the onset of Rugby World Cup Fantasy 2023, I think it leaves a big hole in the fantasy market for all those out there who just enjoy some quote-unquote fake footy and just want to be engrossed in the game. Obviously the benefits for fantasy are insane. You have the grossment of fans year-round, whether it's the draft, whether it's researching new players, seeing new teams, experimenting, bringing fans together and building new ones. Fantasy sports belongs in all facets of the game, especially in rugby. And I just think that the MLR's addition from Oval 3 partners was just lackluster in comparison to the bunch. Now, if you look at it from a holistic standpoint, anything involving crypto or NFTs, it was gonna bomb, especially with the fact that they released it after all of that scandal happened, was a lackluster misstep on the MLR and World Rugby as a whole to allow that to happen. It dilutes the game, it drives people away, and for the few people I know that have played it, the UI is just terrible. And on top of that, for player bases, you have to trade with your NFTs in returns of value. So you're investing almost in a DraftKings format for no real return. You could do the same thing with ESPN and just gamble prop bets on the side. It don't matter. Just make it better. Now, my review of the World Rugby Fantasy app has been absolutely amazing. I think it took the best things from Super Brew and the UI improvements and the graphs from Fox and made it just, the nice happy medium. You have your 100 points salary cap almost allotment, aka from Fox Sports. You have unlimited transfers, which beats out damn near anything on the market. You have easy to track games, schedules, and player breakdowns, stats easy to find. Everything is perfect, and it links back to all their other platforms with the same clean design as in Rugby Pass TV and the Rugby World Cup app. In fact, the fantasy platform, while not actively connected to the app, is linked through it from the Rugby World Cup app. So while not the most perfect start, is by far the best option right now when it comes to rugby fantasy. Now, do I see other teams in other leagues copying this and allowing World Rugby, allowing them to have more regional-based content, such as a Super Rugby fantasy, maybe a Premiership fantasy, or hell, even a redo of the MLR fantasy? I would love it if they kept the same format and included an app just for the globe. You have apps like Ultimate Rugby and formerly of Rugby Pass that had actual stat breakdowns. You had form percentages, every stat you could possibly think of for every team, for every career. Any game you could think of, whether it's the top league or not, was on those apps and is still on those apps in terms of Ultimate Rugby. Rugby Pass, unfortunately, I think, at least in the U.S. market, has gone on the wayside. But, they have the platform and now obviously the modern know-how to make this happen. And I think it would be a misstep of epic proportions for them to miss out on this. The MLR is going to impact from this the most because no one really knows about it outside of the diehard rugby fans in America. If you want to build fans and build from the modern audience, fantasy is the easiest way. It gets people in, I don't know who I drafted. Turns on the Rugby Network or, Fox Sports, depending on where it's at, and or hell, even regional television, and gets to see some new players. You understand the game a little bit better, or you're forced to at least. And yeah, it's a seamless transition. Why would you not take that option? And if they will cut Oval 3, I'm not sure when their license will end actually for that fantasy platform. For all I know, it's a lifetime license, but let's hope it's not, and let's say it's in 3 years. They can develop it right now and get it out there in 3 years and have it be one of the, if not the best options on the fantasy market. Rugby is a growing sport when it comes to fantasy, and they need that as an option. Now, is there a lot of other things that the league could improve, specifically my platform at TRN? I think obviously, of course, when it comes to just basic things like I talked in a recent article about just the improvement on Rugby Pass TV and just streaming rights in general. They when you have apps like Rugby Pass TV that have that sort of design mentality and language that lends its way to more modern audiences, launches with a full staple of very good content, I think you should try it out. It is free. This is not a plug. Well, it kind of is a shameless plug, but we'll get into that later. And has everything from travel shows, rugby breakdown stuff. It has, all of your inbred documentaries, all that stuff. All you could do is just, and they even have a fantasy show. All you have to do is just add the World Fantasy app in there somewhere, and life would be so much easier. That's for starters. The app is just, I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's not as intuitive, especially on a global end. I think the app is way better than our site, if I'm being totally honest with you, but that's still a low bar for me to cross over, and I think that just comes with, the lack of money being funneled into the sport and the budgets available. Because I think we're pushing a lot of our budgetary standpoint in terms of moving money to really put a lot of good quality content up on the site, and obviously everything else is falling by the wayside. But that could include everything from improving the production value of our regional partners at games, throwing in better cameras, more people there, add some extra production, some panache, if you will, to get fans more engrossed, more higher quality footage. So when for those of you who don't know, I also do video editing and print coverage for World Rugby and TRN. Just give me something better to work with, please, for the love of God. I love you guys, but come on, we gotta get some more money into this. Get me some money, get my other coworkers some change, and we'll make something magical. Like just feed us. Obviously, more film and docu-style content would obviously be useful to promote the game on a wider scale, especially on linear networks. I think that's the biggest thing that they miss out on, is the fact that linear networks, because ESPN, a Fox, an ABC, a CBS, because they don't really recognize rugby as a large revenue generating market sport. It's like most things, like lacrosse or bowling, etc. It is relegated to stuff like streaming or ESPN the Ocho, I guess. And because of that, you're not getting the same amount of ad dollars and ratings as you would on a traditional linear network in prime time. I don't think it would take an arm and a leg really to get World Rugby, or specifically the MLR at least, in the good graces enough to be put in those slots, in relation to, say, the MLS, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and obviously the NFL. But any slot's better than no slot, and obviously any linear dollars would translate into better products for you, the viewer. It would translate to better pay for the players, equipment, etc. More referees, because there's a shortage of those around the world. Obviously, every single inch of the product would be better, and I think that only comes with more ad dollars from linear networks. Media rights deals would be killer, and when next year comes with the possible, please for the love of God, decline of Flow Sports and their monopolistic policies, I'm sure all of you can admit with me that Flow charges an arm and a leg for a lackluster product that is basically just streamed, and otherwise the replays are not the greatest, and reliability is terrible, especially only being able to stream to one device is an absolute travesty and a pain for those of us who either want to watch 2 tournaments or have someone that's at home watching and wants to watch, whether it's in an Uber or on a plane. For those of us who are blessed with planes with Wi-Fi, I think it sucks. And when World Rugby regains those rights for bidding, I think that they will be in a better place, especially after the launch of Rugby Pass TV and the incremental gains of TRN, that they will be able to show more people the game, whether it's the MLR, whether it's Super Rugby, anything else, especially the Premiership and the Champions Cup. More than likely, you will see them land on Rugby Pass TV. And that is just a gain for all of us, really. TRN, in my opinion, I think will go there. If you want, you can read more in my article on TRN to learn more about that. But the future is moving towards Rugby Pass TV, basically encompassing all platforms and most streaming services outside of the URC. So I think it'll be a good option for all fans to start, building around that, for Rugby Pass and World Rugby to therefore build a better platform and infrastructure, and I think it'll work out just fine. Obviously, you probably will still have TRN in some form, but TRN will be sequestered, and I think it'll be for the best. In terms of other improvements, I definitely think that there should be some maybe speeding up of some rule improvements just to the game in general. Obviously take some cues from Super Rugby, maybe just have some law trials. That would be another good way to get fans more to the stadium. Just simple things, obviously. Maybe the law thing is a little too far, but in terms of experimentation that has improved the game in meaningful statistics, Super Rugby, while controversial in its law innovations, has brought in more fans that have carried over to the stadium outside of really this year. I think this year was a massive decline, at least for me, in terms of attendance. They have, easily gotten more laws implemented from league and from other sources around to the rest of the world. And it has the biggest improvement in terms of speeding up the game for fans at the stadium and at home. You don't want to have lost time, whether it's, for reset, a couple reset scrums, more than 2 or 3 maybe, or, lineups, etc. Or even warnings to cards. Like, you're losing minutes because of that. And I think that building a league where everything is streamlined, not to say that it's so far as the NBA, the NFL, and soccer entirely, where it becomes a no contact sport and essentially, as the NFL says, the no fun league. But all of that would improve player safety, it would improve fan engrossment, and improve the speed of the game. You're not really losing much out of it. Everyone wins the world over. Case closed. Going off of the MLR and domestic rugby also in general, I definitely think that having 2 leagues, for those of us who don't know, the Glendale Raptors, formerly the Glendale Raptors, now the American Raptors, have moved on and moved to a different league known as Super Rugby Americas. It is just launched this year. It mostly encompasses, I believe, South American teams like Uruguay, Chile, Argentina, and to name a few. But I'm not sure how the ratings go. I'm not even sure how they stream their games. I personally haven't watched. I have a couple friends on the Raptors myself, but it's unattainable really to watch games. Now, I just found out through my coverage of Rugby Town Sevens that they share the app with the American Raptors too. I'm assuming to watch games and read news about them, etc. But it took me that long to figure that out. Really, come on. We all know that's not going to end well, and no fan's really going to know what they're doing. But as a whole, I think it's best that all of those teams, especially with the engrossment of Miami and the movement of really any team in the MLR, they're starting to get the idea that, we can sign, a Uruguay player, a Uruguay international. We can sign a Los Pumas international and get the same amount of talent. We can sign a Chile international and do the same thing. They're carrying it more over to MLR in general. Why not just merge the league? Get all the teams, together, bringing the Raptors back. They were actually a pretty decent team when they were around, at least in the early years of the MLR. Imagine if Chile, Uruguay, and the Pumas had their own, the Jaguares came back from the URC and, kept their players and said, bring them back to home soil, watch your teams for fans, or expats of Argentina, etc., to be able to say, hey, you can watch your teams for free. We're going to bring in, big physical rugby. That's what Miami is obviously looking at in terms of their draft haul. They're going to push the ball down the field. Imagine if Pablo Matera was on your screen, jackling the ball away from Dylan Fawcett and then booting it downfield. Now, amazing things would happen, but it would induce a couple things, I think, for the MLR that may make it unfeasible at the moment to think about. I think because of the way that teams are structured with just, lack of money in the salary cap, especially with the union hopefully coming out soon, you would obviously have to incur more travel costs on both ends of the bargain. You have, teams from Canada would have to travel to, Mendoza or Santiago, and then you would have, a whole bunch of problems with that, whether it's not really the time zone difference, but more or less the travel costs, the lodging, the networking of that standpoint would obviously be more of a front office thing than it would be anything else. But I think it might put some strain on some teams, especially of the lower end of the markets or that haven't gotten as much revenue sharing dollars from being lower in the rankings every year, such as, a NOLA or recently a Toronto. And then on top of that, you really have to think about how it affects the conference scaling. Like, would it just be north and south? Would it be still east and west? But then if it was east, you'd have to think that it would be a little bit unbalanced because of the fact that I believe the only people that would be interested in joining Super Rugby Americas from the west would be Chile. Uruguay, obviously, would be in the Eastern Conference. Argentina, I'm assuming, would be on the Eastern Conference. But that would be a huge shakeup in terms of adding more teams into the scale and possibly throwing it off. You probably would have to go for a north and south and almost have it as a Super Rugby Aotearoa type of deal where, Americans play their whole league, basically what the MLR is now, and just with the addition of the Raptors. And then the, couples out of conference, quote unquote, for those of college football fans, to go to South America and play, and then have their finals be separate, and then have a joint final at the end. Or you could even do a joint playoff. The options are there. It just adds a lot more shakeup and logistics when it comes to the back end that I don't think anyone really plans for. So that could also be a problem. And then, for everyone asking, the question would have to be, is the unification what the league really needs? And I would have to agree. I think rugby is at the moment, while passionate sport, very regional specific, and each league has their own, aspects of what they bring to the table and what they offer. So, for example, the Premiership is more OG, punch it up, set piece football. You have Super Rugby, which plays more into the width. You have France, which has their own flair. The Japan teams, which are kind of like the MLR, but a little bit better in terms of fan engrossment and obviously with age. They have that hodgepodge mentality of just taking little things from everywhere and making it work, especially with the Japanese, work ethic and work rate. I myself am a fan of Suntory and the way they play. I used to watch Kobe, but I haven't been able to really watch streams from them because Stan took it off. But it leaves a lot more options, and with bringing in the South Americans, that also obviously allows for more ability to show that physical rugby outside of South Africa belongs. And the MLR is trending to that. You have teams like Houston. You have, NOLA in a way, but they also bring that physicality through their back line. Obviously, you have Seattle with the way that they move their forward pack. there's a lot of outright options for physicality in the MLR. Miami's going to do it. Chicago already does it in the fashion of a NOLA. But, it allows that type of rugby to thrive. You have regional specific talents and regional specific moves that they like to do. Why not bring it together? Why not do it? It brings more butts into seats, more national fan engrossment. You could do a whole America's cup, almost like how they do the Pacific Nations series. It's perfect, but it'll take some time to do. Hopefully the MLR and World Rugby sees this and they understand the value of such a proposition, and then things and movements are made and shake-ins are done and everything grows the way we hope. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please join me next Monday for our future show. Thanks, everyone.